It's exciting to be here. The quote is from a psychiatrist in the hospital who observed me, and she says, "You must carry a mutation in the gene for optimism. I want to study you as a single subject, and I'll find the gene. I'm a born optimist." So I'm also a doctor, and you can see a typical Dutch doctor here on the left. This is how we practice medicine in the Netherlands. We walk around in the polder, the occasional cow, a little church in the background. This is typical Dutch medicine. And at first sight, the world of medicine could not be more different from the world of art. On the right, you see arguably one of the best experiences of culture in the Netherlands, the Nachtwacht, the Night Watch by Rembrandt. Magnificent piece of art, and doctors are protocol fetishists. We like to stick to protocols and to rules, and artists are creative and do whatever they like. But the interesting thing is actually, when you hear the history of the Night Watch, Rembrandt was actually confined to certain rules. The painting had to have a certain measure, and the people in the painting had to be in a certain order because some were more important than others. So even Rembrandt was confined to certain rules. And to me, as a neurologist, I'm specialized in the brain, and I'm particularly specialized in a disease called Parkinson's disease. These two worlds are bound together by one single molecule, which is called dopamine. Dopamine has to be my favorite chemical substance in the brain. It binds these two worlds together. If you lack dopamine, you develop a debilitating disease called Parkinson's disease. People develop a shuffling gait. Most people equate Parkinson's with a tremor. They become slow in their movements, slow in their thinking, whereas, of course, artists have an abundance of dopamine and then become creative, explorative, not bound to rules. And this one single molecule binds it all together. And we have some very exciting new research where we showed that if you choose to become an artist at age 20, so you begin to explore for yourselves where you are. If you are an artist at age 20, you have a reduced risk of developing Parkinson's disease at age 50, 60, or 70. Whereas those who choose a conventional job, doctors are actually conventional jobs, so I'm at risk, a bookkeeper, an accountant, a teacher, have an increased risk of developing Parkinson's. But the story actually becomes even more fascinating because when you treat people with Parkinson's disease, when you correct their lack of dopamine with dopamine-suppleting drugs, some of them, particularly young men, become artists for the first time in their life. So this is actually a lady who became a painter. She was never an artist, developed Parkinson's, got treated, boosted her dopamine levels, and suddenly she became an artist. This man became a sculptor. And you would agree, it's beautiful art, isn't it? And this man became a photographer. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that beautiful? But the relationship goes actually much further, the relationship between art and medicine. This man is, I really like all my patients, but he's probably one of my favorite patients. His name is Julian Herman. He is the former concertmaster, the first violinist of the Netherlands Philharmonic Orchestra. And he developed Parkinson's disease. And he had seen two other doctors before coming to me. And what the other doctors had done was treat his Parkinson's to correct the symptoms that they were seeing. But his passion was to play the violin. So I said to him, if that is what you like, bring your violin and let me hear what's happening. And just listen with me to his violin play. And I think you would all hear that he started off brilliantly and it got worse and worse. What you just heard is the hallmark of Parkinson's disease. The hallmark of Parkinson's is movements that start in the correct way and become progressively smaller and smaller and smaller and worse and worse. We had an expert violinist. You all recognized Bach's Violin Sonata number 1 in G minor presto, of course. And we had another elite violinist score the notes. And there were no errors in the beginning. Here's the first error, second error, increasingly many errors, and then he stops totally frustrated. This is the signature of Parkinson's. We now have a complete research line around hearing the symptoms of the disease rather than seeing them. The ear is much more sensitive to picking up these dysrhythmias that are so typical for the disease, and much better than the clinical eye. We published this in the Annals of Neurology, which is one of our leading journals, under the title Listen to Your Patient, which in these days, of course, is extra important because we want to listen to the wishes of our patients. But in this particular case, it's extra important because you can hear his disease better than you can see it. And the relationship between art and medicine goes further and further. Art is a treatment. This is Dance for Health. It's a group of people who dance with patients with Parkinson's disease. I did not bring a video, but there are wonderful examples of people frozen to the ground, unable to move. The music starts to play and they can dance and they can move because the external rhythms correct their inability of the brain to generate their own rhythms. It's a really nice story. I was at a congress in Dallas. There were 1,000 patients in the audience wearing Stetsons, the typical Americans, of course. And then there was another speaker, it wasn't me, and he was playing music. And he played the Rolling Stones. And sure enough, 100 of those Americans started to dance. And then he switched to the Beatles. The Stones fans immediately sat down. And the Beatles fans started to move. And then he put on ZZ Top. Everybody sat down and he started to dance. So it taps into our emotions and our own specific, unique preferences. So art as a treatment. I have patients who combat their disease by making beautiful paintings or by beautiful photography or poetry about Parkinson's. So art as a treatment for our patients. And then the relationship still goes further. This is a beautiful project run at the Radboud University Medical Center, where young interns are now forced in their medical curriculum to work with an artist and to start to look at paintings through the eyes of an artist. And what they teach the students is to zoom out. So one beautiful example is they had the students look at Van Gogh's aardappeleters, the potato eaters. You all know the painting. And the students looked at the painting and they said, oh, I see an ugly nose. There's a lamp dangling from the ceiling. There's a man in the corner. Nobody said, it's a group, it's a family in a barn eating a bunch of potatoes. So what doctors do is they zoom in, but they cannot zoom out. And artists by nature are people who are able to zoom out and create the total picture. Artists are also good in handling uncertainty. You never know where art begins and where it ends. I don't know of any artist who said, I started to make that painting that was already in my head. It grows as you paint. People think that we doctors know everything. We don't. Medicine is a very, very uncertain profession. It's different with each and every single patient. Artists can teach our young doctors how to handle uncertainty. It's a beautiful curriculum. So I was invited, it's one of my most prestigious lectures ever, to lecture at the Edinburgh Culture Festival, which you may know is the largest cultural festival in the world. And my task was to speak to all the ministers of culture all around the world to tell them that saving on art was harmful for the population's health. So I hit the panic button. But then I realized, and you've heard it, how closely intertwined these worlds are. I think art and medicine are like Romeo and Juliet. They're inseparable. And I think in a time and era of financial constraints and crisis, it's very tempting to close a museum or to cut your budget for an orchestra. But I think you really do harm the population's health. I think we should take a U-turn and invest in art, invest in culture, to make our people healthier and better. And just to close my presentation, I want to take you back to Edinburgh. Because when I was invited for this lecture, I decided to do it together with Julian Herman, who had withdrawn from public life because of his Parkinson's. He had never played in public since he developed Parkinson's. And because we heard the typical Parkinsonian signs in his violin play, which are dopamine sensitive, so we tweaked his dopaminergic medication so he could play the violin. You'll see in the video that we had a splint developed by our occupational therapist because his right hand was sliding off the violin. So with a multidisciplinary, personalized approach, we made him ready for a public performance. And he joined me in Edinburgh and gave a public performance. And please let the images speak for themselves, and any applause is for Julian.
Give the technicians 2 CDs that I recorded before Parkinson started, and I will be playing with the other guy. So if I miss something, he won't.
And he received a standing ovation of all these ministers of culture from around the world. And I think the applause is for Julian. Thank you very much.